Aamir Khan versus Satyajit Ray. Sounds like a typical YouTube clickbait title, does it not? Let me assure you, it is not in this case. Give me a few minutes of your precious time and I will explain why I decided to make a video with this title. I was watching the climax scene of the famous Hindi motion picture Ghulam recently on YouTube. If you don't remember Ghulam, it released in June 1998. It featured Aamir Khan and Rani Mukherjee in starring roles. Aamir Khan, of course, was the protagonist. His character was called Siddharth, and the main villain of the movie was Sharat Saxena's Raunak Singh, also known as Ronnie. In my humble opinion, Raunak Singh is one of the greatest villains ever portrayed in a Hindi motion picture. He deserves his place right alongside the likes of Mugambo and Gabbar Singh. Ghulam features some iconic scenes like Aamir Khan running full speed in the direction of a speeding train moving towards him. He was running towards the train, not away from it. It featured Aamir Khan extinguishing a lit matchstick on his tongue at the end of the famous song Aati Kya Khandala, sung by Aamir Khan himself. And it featured the fist fight scene, which I have watched so many times on YouTube. A fist fight scene between Aamir Khan's Siddharth and Sharat Saxena's Ronnie. It's almost like a David versus Goliath scene fought right on the streets of Mumbai. Why then am I comparing Aamir Khan, Mr. Perfectionist of the Hindi film industry, with Satyajit Ray, arguably the greatest filmmaker India has ever seen? It seems like a futile exercise, but stay with me here. The reason I'm doing this is in the movie Ghulam, many of society's deep-seated problems were highlighted. And in the movie Ghulam, an attempt was made to combat those same societal problems through the legal route. However, in the third act of Ghulam, the same problems were resolved through a fist fight. Maybe it was done to sustain the interest of the viewers. Maybe a long drawn-out legal battle does not lend itself automatically well to being adapted on the silver screen. Which made me question, can deep-seated societal problems only be resolved through an action sequence in motion pictures? Is that a limitation of motion pictures as a whole or Hindi motion pictures of a certain era? Which made me think, was there an Indian filmmaker from the past who did not resort to action sequences to resolve the complex societal problems that he may have highlighted in his motion pictures? And the name Satyajit Ray immediately popped up in my mind. Satyajit Ray has made 36 motion pictures. I have watched all of them. I've even made a video on this channel, which you can check out, where I've briefly reviewed all 36 of his movies in the same video. In none of his movies did he resort to an action sequence to resolve the conflict in the climax. In fact, Satyajit Ray, as we call him in Bengal, is better known as Satyajit Ray in the Western world, never used action sequence even if the protagonist of the movie was a private investigator. He has used a private investigator as the protagonist of his movies in 3 instances. Uttam Kumar in Chiriyakhana and Soumitra Chattopadhyay in Sonar Kella and Joy Baba Felunath. But even in these 3 motion pictures, an action sequence was not used to resolve the conflicts. Why is this the case? Why did Hindi motion pictures frequently resort to action sequences in the climax? And why did Satyajit Ray never resort to action sequences to resolve his conflicts? Was it a technical deficiency in the Bengali film industry? Action sequences were impossible to shoot with the limited resources available to filmmakers in Bengal? Or was it a deliberate creative choice? If I were to question the creative capabilities of Satyajit Ray and cast aspersions regarding maybe he was not quite capable of shooting action sequences, he might respond in this way.
But they are stupid people. You can't take them into account. This happens in India all the time. And people don't, we have a fairly backward audience here, I must say, in spite of the film society movement and all that. If you consider the large audience, it's a backward audience, unsophisticated audience, exposed to the commercial Hindi cinema more than anything else.
Satyajit Ray did not use action sequences deliberately. Why? Let's find out in this video. We will address why action sequences were frequently used in the Hindi motion pictures, and we will also address why Satyajit Ray, arguably the greatest Indian filmmaker, never used action sequences to resolve the conflicts highlighted in his motion pictures. It will be an engaging watch. Hindi motion pictures, especially from the 70s right up to the 90s, frequently used action sequences, fist fights, car chase, different variations of high octane action to resolve the conflict in the third act. Why was this the case? For three simple reasons: visual satisfaction, simplification of the conflict, and a successful commercial formula. Let me explain them one by one. What do I mean by visual satisfaction? An action sequence is visceral. You can feel it in your bones. A blow received by the hero is felt by the audience members rooting for him. A blow delivered by the hero is almost delivered by the audience members still rooting for him. It's kinetic, it's dramatic, it's quick. You are always glued to the screen. And at the end of the action sequence, when the villain predictably loses, it almost feels like every member of the audience individually was responsible for the downfall of the villain. Very satisfying to watch. It also simplifies the conflict into a very convenient binary: good versus evil. Hero good, villain evil. Hero wins, good wins. Villain loses, evil loses. The audience leaves the theater satisfied. They start feeling happy about themselves. It's a happy ending after all. And the most important point, which applies to YouTube videos as well: it's a successful commercial formula. If any formula starts delivering results, people start copying it. You have seen it on YouTube also. Many content creators simply copy the content already viral on YouTube. In fact, they do it deliberately and they even promote it. Check out a YouTube video that is very popular and put up a contrarian opinion on that. Try to follow what successful YouTube content creators are doing and make videos on the same topic. You will also see success. This might build audience engagement, which is very important both for makers of Hindi motion pictures and for makers of YouTube videos. But it fails in one important category: it does not reflect reality. That's where Satyajit Ray comes in. Satyajit Ray never resorted to action sequences not because he couldn't. He had the creative capability to shoot action sequences. He just chose not to because he favored reality over fantasy. Despite being a filmmaker, Satyajit Ray understood that life's problems are complex. They cannot be reduced to a binary, and they are very rarely climactic. In Satyajit Ray motion pictures, if you have seen them, you would have seen that his characters never win in the traditional sense. They learn, they endure, they adapt, and sometimes they outright fail. That's a much more normal human reaction and a much more believable resolution to the conflicts he has shown in his movies. In Satyajit Ray's worldview, violence is never a noble gesture. It is disruptive and sometimes a symptom of outright failure. Satyajit Ray was more interested in his characters coming to terms with the reality. He was more interested in moments of realization, quiet moral choices, and sometimes even moments of silent protest. Satyajit Ray believed that structural issues plaguing society needed introspection, not combat. Let me give you an example of two of his movies, Jano Aranyo and Oshoni Sanket. In these two movies, Satyajit Ray has highlighted some of the most evil problems plaguing human society: economic hardship, corruption, war, famine. But in these two movies, at no point does any character try to use his fists to resolve the conflict. Instead, he forces us, the members of the audience, to confront the inertia, the weight of social decay, the lack of action. He urges us to express empathy. He forces us to be thoughtful, to think rather than seek vengeance. Now you might think these are just creative differences. Each creator can choose the way in which he decides to resolve conflicts. Some people want to be entertained while watching a motion picture. They don't want to think. They don't want thought-provoking content, or as some people would call it, depressing content. They want to forget the world. They want to be entertained. They want to enjoy the violence, the action sequences. Now, I am not going to criticize the use of violence in the same way many critics have criticized Quentin Tarantino films. The argument is if you glorify violence on screen, it promotes violence in real life. I don't subscribe to that argument, and I believe it is a facile argument because violence has existed in human society far beyond the 20th century, whereas cinema is largely a 20th century phenomenon. You might say the glorification of violence on the silver screen in video games may have exacerbated the problem, but that is a much more nuanced debate which can be the subject of a different video. My criticism of violence in movies like Ghulam, which highlights societal problems, is it culturally conditions the viewing audience and society at large that often complex societal problems can be resolved quickly with one knockout punch. That's not the case. Change in society often requires collective effort. It is often painful and almost always time consuming. When the members of the audience and society at large witness that change is taking a lot of time, there is a natural tendency to lose interest, which is not in the interest of society at large. That's my argument against the constant use of action sequences to resolve complex societal problems. Life rarely has a clean third act climax. All of us have heard the term escapist cinema. We want to forget about the world when we enter that theater and be entertained for 3 hours. But Satyajit Ray's movies never offered escape. They offered awareness. Satyajit Ray trusted the members of his audience to sit in the theater with discomfort, to reflect silently, to witness the mirror reflecting the member of his audience to himself, and sometimes a reflection of the society he was living in. That's a much harder proposition to sell as a motion picture. Consequently, Satyajit Ray movies never did the kind of business that we have seen in the Mumbai film industry or in Hollywood. But these movies made by Satyajit Ray are infinitely more valuable. You compare Satyajit Ray movies with the Angry Young Man movies in the Hindi film industry. The Angry Young Man movies were much more commercially successful. But the Angry Young Man movie required just one person to bring about radical change, or at least offer a radical solution. It did not involve the collective effort of the entire society. The Angry Young Man movies or the Hindi motion pictures with action sequences which resolved the complex societal conflicts offered resolution without change, justice without systems, and truth without the slightest sense of ambiguity. In many ways, Satyajit Ray was not making movies, he was offering his ethical framework. He was offering his worldview. In Satyajit Ray's worldview, action sequences were not just out of place, they were downright dishonest. The punch, as shown in Hindi motion pictures, typically in the third act climax, resolving the conflicts, may silence a fearsome villain like Ronak Singh, may win applause from the members of the audience in the theater, may even sell out theaters, may even earn a lot of revenue at the box office. But it does not produce societal change. Violence may shake a system, but to transform a system, one requires a slow process that is often painful and requires the effort of more than one angry young man. You, the viewer of this YouTube video, know this. Satyajit Ray knew that, and that is why Satyajit Ray, or as the Western world remembers him, Satyajit Ray, remains timeless.